Don Bradman used to get at Barrow Primary School just up the road, and he was a great player for Australia.
He played 52 test matches, ended up with a total of 6,996 runs.
My grandpa, he was a fan of him, and once he's been to a few games and he said he can really hit it.
When his grandfather was just a lad in the black and white world of whippet racing, and billy carts made from fruit boxes, and food queues stretched across Australia, they packed up their troubles and they went out to watch the Don at play, especially the ladies. He was our hero of heroes. Sir Roden Cutler VC, war hero and governor, remembers it well.
He gave us entertainment of a superb kind. Cricket was generally loved by the community, and this was something which lifted us out of the Depression, and the Depression really was very hard. Don Bradman gave us relaxation, gave us entertainment, he gave us a feeling of being proud of him and what he was doing.
Just like the band, the boy from Bowral played on. Just like we all would if we all could. With the sharp reflexes of a bird of prey and tiny dancer's feet, he smacked and cracked every loose ball, and lots that wouldn't. Don Bradman was more than simply the best. He was also the brightest, the fastest, and the highest scorer, ever. At Bowral, across from Don's old home, on the oval they call the Bradman, 12-year-old boys still fearlessly face Harold Larwood, and they hoik him to the fence. The Bradman Museum will foster what he calls this glorious game. Some say the museum will also help keep his memory alive. The truth is, Don Bradman is probably immortal, or as close as you can get. Tonight we launch the Bradman Appeal. Not a cent collected will go to the Don, not a cracker. That's the only way he'd have it. He gave hundreds of speeches, tens of thousands of runs, millions of memories, all for free. A few weeks ago, one of his old cast-off bats sold at auction for almost $50,000. It doesn't make any sense to Don Bradman. He played just because he loved it.
Donations can be made by calling 1800 24 119 or by visiting any branch of the National Australia Bank.
Ken, I have the pleasure of announcing that the Prime Minister, Mr Howard, has tonight pledged $100,000 from the Commonwealth Government to the Bradman Museum Appeal. So that's a tremendous start.
Very encouraging. Mark and I will be back with some very special guests after the interview with Sir Donald Bradman. See you soon.
Need 100.
Mr Woodfall had something to say about records that have come my way. It must always be remembered that for a batsman to break a record, someone has got to stay at the other end. A batting genius could not get anywhere without the support of his teammates to hold the fort and keep his innings alive. Therefore, any plaudits that come my way for record breaking must be shared by my teammates who so efficiently supported me throughout. Cricket is a glorious game and is made the more interesting and sporting because of its uncertainty. Play the game for the game's sake is my advice to the youngsters coming on, and keep your eye on the ball.
Sir Donald, thanks for your time. Thanks for talking to me.
Pleasure.
Now, 30 years I've interviewed princes and presidents and prime ministers. Why am I nervous in talking to Donald Bradman?
I don't think you are. I'm the one who's nervous, not you.
But when I told people I was doing the interview, they said almost to a man and a woman, that people would say to me, well, that's fantastic, half your luck. Do you still realise just that you're not just respected, but you're deeply loved in Australia?
No, I don't look at it that way at all. I'm just an ordinary human being.
Is that why you've not spoken to anyone for so long?
Oh, I've spoken to a lot of people, but not publicly. I don't like publicity of any kind. Never have done. I like it less as I get older.
That's quite funny, because you've probably had more publicity than any Australian of this generation.
Well, maybe I have, but not because I wanted it, because I couldn't help it.
Mind you, being famous and being loved didn't stop you from getting booked recently.
Oh yes, that's a great story. That happened the other day. I'd been having a round of golf, and I was driving home quietly in the afternoon about 3 o'clock. The strange part about it happened alongside Victoria Park Racecourse, where the Grand Prix circuit is. I was actually driving on the Grand Prix circuit, and the policeman waved me down. There were no other cars in the vicinity at all. I thought he must have broken down, he wanted some help. And when he pulled me over, he said, "I'm sorry, but you've been exceeding the speed limit." I said, "No, not me." I said, "The speed limit's only 60 here. At least the speed limit's only 80 here, and I was only doing about 70. He said, "Oh, my radar gun tells me that you were doing 72 and the speed limit is only 60. And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, but I thought the speed limit was 80 at this point." "No," he said, "that's not right." And then he said, "Have you got your licence with you?" And I pulled out the wallet and produced it to him, and he got out of his book and started to make some notes. And he said, "Are you Sir Donald Bradman?" I said, "Yes, that's right." He said, "Well, it's an honour and a pleasure to meet you." And I said, "I'm very sorry, I can't say the same to you."
So did he book you?
Oh, certainly. I went away $173 poorer, but very much wiser.
So there's a policeman in South Australia who would be brazen enough to book Don Bradman?
Yeah, which proves there's no corruption in the force in South Australia.
Are you a speed merchant by nature?
No, I'm not. I'm such a slow driver that it's a byword in our family. We were driving to town one day. My daughter was sitting in the back seat, and we were halfway to town, and she said, "What's the matter, Dad? Are we driving into a headwind?" That's my reputation as a driver.
What about fan mail now? How much fan mail do you still get?
Well, I probably get more fan mail today than I ever got in my life, except on the 1948 tour of England, when it was absolutely incredible. But I still get so much that I would say that on average, it takes me about 4 hours per day to answer my mail. It's absolutely tremendous.
From everywhere, from all around the world?
Yes, all over the world. Mainly, of course, Australia, but I get a lot from India, and I get a lot from England as well.
What's the funniest you've got?
Well, I've had some very funny ones. One little chap wrote to me and he said, I would like your autograph. He said, "I'm sorry this request comes so late, but I always regret it if it came too late." So I replied to him and said, "Well, you wouldn't regret it half as much as I would." Then there was a more brutal one that came from a boy. He said, "My name is Andrew, I'm 10 years of age and I live in Darwin. I've been wanting to write to you, but my grandfather says you're dead. But my father recently told me you're still alive, so I'm writing to find out the truth."
Did you tell him?
I had to write and tell him the truth. There's one the other day came from a little boy and he said, "My name's Jake. I'm 4 years old. I wanted to write to you for some time. I'm doing so now with the help of my brother Tom. He's 10.
And is this usually for an autograph or advice or?
Mostly autographs. A lot of them ask for advice, but mostly autographs.
And what would you get a week?
Oh, it would certainly run into hundreds.
Now, by comparison, the 48 tour, you were talking about 600 a day or so.
It reached 600 a day in England, but of course in England that involved the whole team. People would write to me to ask for autographs on behalf of the whole side. And we knew that was going to happen to a large extent. Before we got to England on the boat going over, we signed 5,000 sheets, autograph sheets, so that they would be ready to send out to people who wrote in and asked for them. And they lasted just 1 week.
All right. Well, but why do you think there's Don Bradman and there's other cricketers? What was the difference then?
I don't know. I saw a lot of cricketers whom I thought had more talent than I had. I can remember very well having a conversation with Sir Neville Cardus on one occasion, and he said he was coming down to a particular match and he wanted to see me make 100. And I said, "Neville, we've got a little boy on our side called Ray Robinson. He played cricket for Australia very briefly, came from Newcastle in New South Wales. I said, if you see Robinson make 100, you'll never want to see me again, because he's so much better than I am. And yet he didn't do any good, and I can't tell you why.
What about Stan McCabe? Is it true that you actually shook hands with him when he scored that magnificent century in England?
Yes, that was at Nottingham in 1938. That was the best innings that I ever saw anybody play in my whole life. And it's the first innings of our team. We were a long way behind because the England had made a big score, and we were behind on the first innings. And Stan was trying to rescue us. And they got to the stage where there was only one wicket left to fall. That was Fleetwood Smith. Stan McCabe was batting with Fleetwood, and they put on 77 runs for the last wicket in 20-odd minutes. And the English captain had 5 men on the boundary, and he was trying to rob Stan of the strike all the time, and he still made these runs so fast. And I did say to our boys, I said, come out on the balcony and have a look at this, because you'll never see innings like it again. And that was the best innings I ever saw in my life.
And is it? And you say in your book that when he came in, you shook his hand.
I did.
And you said, I wish I could play like that.
I did. That's exactly what I said. I wish I could play an innings like that.
He's the towering sports figure of our history, and he has an astonishing appeal to Australians of all generations. I can remember being taken by my father when I was 10 to see his last innings at the Sydney Cricket Ground in the Kippax Oldfield Testimonial. I think from recollection he got 54. Now he's been out of the game for approximately 45 years, but he still has this enormous domination. He's more than a great Australian and a great legend. He really is in every way a great Australian treasure.
Now let us see the Prince of Batsmen in action, Don Bradman, just come to man's estate and already known as the most phenomenal run-getting machine the world has ever seen. A favourite shot of Don's is the pull. Watch how his right foot travels across the wicket so that he can get behind the ball as he pelts it to the pickets. Bradman used this stroke to get the necessary fourer in making the highest score for Test cricket at Leeds last year when he made 334.
The 334 that you got, which for a while was the world record, this is the bat.
Yes.
You didn't regard it as your best innings?
Technically, no, because I made a few errors on the way.
What's a few errors?
well, when you aim to hit a ball through the cover, for instance, it goes down to third man, that's an error. It doesn't go where you want it to go.
But you got 100 runs before lunch and 200 before tea and 309 before the end of at the close of play.
Yes, I know. That's the ultimate result. But I played a better innings than that when I played at Lord's in 1930. I made 254 at Lord's, and every ball went exactly where I wanted it to go until the ball I got out.
The fact that you were rarely caught behind, why was that? Why weren't you caught by the keeper as much as modern-day cricketers?
I think maybe there was a little difference in my technique and the technique of most of the players today. Don't forget, I've made it very clear to you many times that I was not coached. I adopted a natural style, just what suited me, and I developed what I might term a closed bat type of play. Now, by closed face, I mean that in playing at the ball, I would tend to play at the ball and then turn the bat face in that direction and get perhaps a little bit further over on the offside to do it. The modern player, or most of the modern players anyway, are coached from the word go that they've got to keep the bat face absolutely square. And so their object is to keep the bat in that direction. Not only do they keep it in that direction, but they can't follow through and get right over as I did at the finish of a drive. But if the ball leaves them at all, they tend to open the blade a little bit to glance the ball perhaps behind point down the gully. And this exposes the edge of the bat a little bit more than I used to do. I think in addition to that, it's also partly due to the fact that the bats they use today are much heavier.
Right.
You can play perpendicular shots with a heavy bat, but you can't play cross-bat shots with a heavy bat. And I think this tends to make them, I might use the phrase lazy. They become lazy in their defensive patterns.
But that's, I mean, that was your style. That's almost like a golf shot, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the same as the finish of a golf shot, yes.
So why don't we see that today with any of the great batsmen?
I think it's because they're coached not to do it. They're coached to keep the left wrist in front of the bat handle and to keep the blade perpendicular.
But we're talking about the best players in the world.
Oh, well, maybe. They're still these players are very good players. The ones you're talking about, it's just a different technique, that's all.
So what advice would you give them tonight, Sir Donald? Free.
I would certainly advise players to use a lighter bat. I think that bats weighing up to 3 pounds are too heavy.
Right.
They're all right maybe for Clive Lloyd, who was a very big, very strong individual. But the ordinary player today, I think, is much better off using a bat weighing 2 pounds 6 or 2 pounds 7.
Right. And get that bat up behind your head.
To get into that position, of course, he would have to be coached into a different technique, a different style.
Are you available?
No, I'm not available. I'm past it.
Okay, thank you. So when you started playing Shield cricket here in your first-class cricket, how much were you paid as a Shield player?
Oh, in those days for Sheffield Shield, I think we received 10 shillings a day. That's $1 in today's money.
And for a test?
And of course our hotel accommodations.
Bed and board, eh?
Test matches, I think we got to £25. That's $50 for test match. That, of course, would cover the whole match, no matter how long it lasted. When I started, test matches were played to a finish. I played in one in Melbourne which lasted 8 days. So that with the Sunday thrown in, that meant we had to be there for 9 days. We had to be there the day before, we had to be there the day after. So really, that took up the best part of a fortnight.
But £600, £600 for the English tour, that was fairly good.
Oh, that was reasonable, yes. That was quite reasonable. Of course, in that particular case, it had to make up for a man losing his salary all the time he was away from Australia.
And that would be 6 months or 7 months, the whole tour?
Oh, 8 months. We'd leave Australia, we'd go down to Tasmania first and play down there. And then, of course, we went by ship, as you know, which took us, I think it was 6 weeks. We would leave Australia at the end of February or the beginning of March. We wouldn't get back again until November. So that was about 8 months.
When you read about someone like Shane Warne or Tendulkar and read of $1 million contracts over a period of time, can you believe it, or is that just a sign of the times?
Well, it's certainly a sign of the times. And don't forget the tremendous differences in the days that I played cricket for Australia. We were all amateurs. That is, the Australians were all amateurs. And we didn't earn our living playing cricket. We played cricket because we loved it and for the fun of the game.
So what would you do in a Shield or a Test game? Would you go to work in the morning and then go and play cricket and then go to work?
I would in Adelaide. When I was running my own business in Adelaide, I would go to the office at 7 o'clock in the morning. I would work there until it was time to go to the Adelaide Oval. Then I'd go back to the office in the evening and work there, probably till 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night. That was regular. I had to do that in connection with my work.
And then come back here and score runs the next day?
Yeah, I'd try to.
Why didn't you go to England and become a professional in 1930?
Because I never wanted to become a professional cricketer. I wanted to play cricket because I loved it and because I enjoyed it, and not for a living. I think if I played cricket for a living, I would have lost the enjoyment of playing cricket.
What was the line you had, that you didn't want cricket to interfere with your work?
Well, you can put it that way if you like, but I I always wanted a job that had nothing to do with cricket. I got pushed into work which was associated with cricket, that is newspaper work, radio work, writing for the newspapers. I got pushed into that because the Depression came and I was out of a job. And I had to earn a living somehow. So I accepted what was available. But I still didn't like it. I didn't want to do it. And I waited until the opportunity came along to do something that had nothing to do with cricket. That's why I came to South Australia as a sharebroker.
But you did seriously think about going and playing in Lancashire League. There was a time there when you thought that was the only option?
Only because I couldn't get a job anywhere else.
It looks like occasions that you were reckless, not just the cavalier, but I mean, you were the shots of you 2 and 3 yards down the pitch, hitting the ball, by the way. But I mean, what was the drive there? What was the motivation?
Well, sometimes I did play reckless shots and I often paid the penalty as well. Before the bowler was running up to bowl, I'm not thinking, I'll score off this chap if he bowls me a bad ball. I'm thinking I'll try and score off this ball if I can. And it's only when he bowls me a ball that's good enough to prevent me from scoring that I don't try. But I think the mental attitude is important. You should be thinking to yourself, I am going to score if I can.
I noticed you could count on almost one hand, and all your innings, 338 first-class innings, once you got to 75 or 80, you didn't get out before 100.
Not very often.
What's that mean?
Well, I suppose it means that my concentration was good.
So did you figure that, unlike a lot of batsmen today, that if I've got this far, I can get the extra 20 to get that ton?
Oh, yes. I was never doubtful about that. If I got to 75, of course I thought I was going to get 100. No question about that.
Peebles is bowling to Bradman. That gives Bradman 99. Bradman's batting to Larwood. That gives him his century.
Now, Sir Donald, we're going to blame where it's due. Bodyline was your fault.
Was it?
Yes, you're to blame. You're the bloke they aimed it at.
Well, history seems to suggest that, doesn't it?
You said in your book that unless you face bodyline bowling yourself, you'll never understand the danger. Tell me about the danger.
Well, you've got a little missile, which is what, 5.5 to 6 ounces, it's the shape of a cricket ball, coming at you at a speed of about 80 to 90 miles an hour. And from the time it leaves the bowler's hand until it reaches you is of the order of 1/7 of a second. And that time you've got to pick up the line of the ball, see where it pitches, and the bounce is very often uneven off the pitch, so that it lands in a certain place that may reach you at that height, may reach you at head height, may go over the top. So in that short space of time, you've got to make up your mind where that ball is and try and do something, either try and play a scoring shot off it or a defensive shot or get out of the road. Now, that is a pretty tall order. If you ask a medical man how much you're capable of doing in 1/7 of a second under those circumstances, it's a very difficult proposition. And it was very, very highly dangerous indeed to the players, and they weren't done up like Michelin tyre advertisements in those days. They had relatively modern, rather relatively old-fashioned guards, and no helmets. Helmets were not worn, and it was a very, very dangerous thing.
What did you have? You had a chest guard of some kind?
I had a rubber guard around the chest there and a thigh pad. That was all. Nothing else.
Did you think someone might get killed?
I don't think I ever went so far as to think somebody might get killed, but I certainly thought there was a very real danger of serious injury, as in fact there was. And there were a lot of times when fellas were missed by a hair's breadth getting out of the road.
But you had expected, after the 1930 tour in England, you'd expected that it would be a sort of bumper campaign, didn't you?
I expected that there might be some emphasis on short-pitched fast bowling, but it was the question of a leg-side field that caught everybody. We didn't anticipate that. And it was not barred by the laws of cricket, but it was what you would call not in the spirit of the game. And Billy Woodfull, of course, complained about that right from the outset.
Yes. Now, Woodfull was captain. He was hit here.
Yes.
On this ground, and then shortly afterwards, Oldfield was hit.
Yeah.
Did you expect, I mean, it's hard to imagine the tranquility there, but we read now that there are armed police out the back, there are special police forces there was the fear of a riot, that it reached that condition.
We were seriously thinking there might be a riot of some kind because the crowds were very upset at the injuries to the players.
The Australian captain in that dressing room over there on the bench said to one of the English manager, there are two sides out there and only one's playing cricket.
Well, that is what is alleged to have said. As far as I know, there was nobody else in the room at the time, but that's what I understand happened.
And someone leaked that to the press later.
Somebody leaked it to the press, but it wasn't me. I was blamed for it, but it wasn't me.
OK, so, but did you feel that as well? I mean, would you be in agreement that only one side was playing cricket?
Well, we were playing a different brand of cricket, let's put it that way.
What did you say? You were good mates with Gubby Allen, you were good mates with a lot of the English players. What did you say to them privately?
Well, Gubby Allen was opposed to it. He was asked to bowl bodyline by Douglas Jardine and he refused. And he said to Douglas, I'm not going to bowl that sort of cricket, that sort of bowling. And if you disagree with me, you can put me on the first boat and send me back to England. And he said, but if you do, the first thing I will do is go straight to the headquarters of MCC and tell them what's happening. And Douglas never pursued the bat at all with Allen, he let it drop. And of course, Allen never bowled a bodyline.
Now, Larwood said that he'd seen you flinch at bumpers in England in the 1930 season, and that's the reason why they decided this tactic.
Yeah, well, of course, that's not true. In the particular match concerned, I made a score of well over 200, and I was given out caught behind off a ball that hit my shirt sleeve and didn't hit my bat. And I think that's the best answer I can give as to whether I was flinching or not. I'd hardly made 200 odd runs if I was flinching on what most of the time was a wet wicket.
And also, according to the reports, had you and Archie Jackson battered and bruised from, in fact, you'd taken a lot of balls on the body.
Well, we did. And of course, you're only going to look at the newspapers of the day and you'll see photos of Archie in particular being badly hit.
So what did you say to Jardine out here? What did
Nothing, never spoke to him.
Not a word?
No.
What about afterwards when they went back for a cup?
No, never spoke to him. I never spoke a word to him on the whole tour that I can remember.
And Larwood?
No, I never spoke to Harold either. We didn't fraternise in the dressing room in those days, as they normally do. There was no fraternisation between the teams at all.
Because of bodyline, because of the bad blood?
Mm.
Was that the only time in all the games that you played where you didn't talk to other players?
Absolutely, the only time, the only season.
Did you hate being beaten by that tactic?
Well, hate's not a word that's in my vocabulary normally. I wouldn't go so far as to say that, but I certainly didn't like it.
Because, I mean, clearly they'd come out from everything we read, and you must have known, you'd scored so many runs in that previous series in England that they'd come out here, Jardine had come out with a tactic to stop Don Bradman.
But in doing so, of course, he stopped everybody else.
The world's greatest batsman deals with this Larwood menace. The nimble-footed fellow walks away to the offside and continually ducks out of danger. He intended to play that ball, but the crowd at the leg field caused him to alter his tactics. Bradman tried every possible way to play this style of bowling, and despite this devastating attack, which more than anything else robbed Australia of the Ashes, and eventually got Bradman's wicket on this occasion, the versatile lad from Bowral succeeded in leading the Test match averages.
Over the years, since it all started, around about 1877 with the Test matches, there's just one man who could be classed as the great, and that was the Don. Don Bradman, the little kid who threw the golf ball up against the wall and hit it with a stump when it came back, and then went out in the backyard of his home at Bowral and threw it up against a tank and hit it. And I can tell you, having tried to do that, it is very difficult indeed. And not only was he a fine player, the great batsman, but he's also a splendid administrator and chairman of selectors. And I was lucky that while I was captain, he was the chairman of selectors, and we did some pretty good things together. Keith Miller once said to me when I was complaining bitterly about Bradman having retired the year I started in first-class cricket, the fact that I couldn't bowl at him, he said, "We've all had a lucky break in our lives, son, and that may well have been yours." The Don, well, just the great man in Australian cricket, and the survey was quite right recently that showed he's the great person in Australian sporting history. And tonight you can play a part in preserving Australia's greatest sporting treasure for many generations to come.
So, Donald, the etiquette of modern cricket. I'd like to talk about some of the antics that players get up to. Did you ever feel like smacking a wicket when you got out?
I might have felt like it, but I certainly never did it.
What stopped you?
Well, I only did it once, and that was when I hit my own wicket and knocked it down playing against the Indians in Australia.
That was an accident, though?
1947-8, yes, it was an accident and I was out. But it's purely a question of mental self-control. I think everybody feels very uptight when he suddenly gets out. He makes a silly mistake. He may feel like smacking the wicket, but he's got to control himself.
What about sledging?
Well, I played under Alan Kippax in New South Wales for some time. I played under Jack Ryder, Test Series 28-9. I played under Bill Woodfull from 1930 till he retired, and then I captained the side myself until I retired. And in the whole of that period, I don't recall one single instance of sledging. It never occurred, and it would not have occurred because we would not have allowed it. None of those captains would have allowed it to happen. If a fellow had attempted that under me, I would have given him one warning, and if he repeated it, I would have made sure he would not select it again.
So this is the sledging that goes on usually behind the wickets?
Well, it never went on in my day, never at all, and I don't think it should happen now.
What about underarm? Legal but not cricket?
Well, it's still in the laws of cricket that you can bowl underarm, providing you give the umpire notice in advance that you're going to bowl underarm, because if you don't, he calls it no ball. It's the sort of thing that is not normally done, but it was done on the famous occasion, as we all know, and the less said about that, the better.
What did you think about that, though? Were you shocked?
I didn't. Yes, I was. I didn't enjoy it at all.
What about bribes? Did you ever hear of bribes?
Never.
Despite the fact that they bet on cricket in England?
Never. I've never heard of a bribe. Nothing has ever transpired, to my knowledge, ever.
If they're going to bribe anybody, it'd be you, because you were the bloke who was the threat for about 10 years. And
I can assure you, nobody ever spoke to me about a bribe in any way, shape or form.
Was Larwood the fastest bowler you ever saw?
No, he wasn't. At his best, he was very good and very fast indeed, but the fastest bowler I have ever seen was Frank Tyson. He wasn't as good a bowler as Harold, but he was tremendously fast.
How about the best fast bowler?
I wouldn't like to pick out one. I think probably Dennis Lilly's got the best record, if you like to go through statistics, but there were several about the same mark.
I'm going to ask you, the best batsman?
I'm not going to answer that either, because there are so many batsmen who are very close to being the same mark. If you ask me who's the best batsman I've ever seen, I would start off by saying, well, there was George Headley, there was Everton Weekes, there was Barry Richards, there was Graham Pollock, Wally Hammond, Sir Jack Hobbs, Sir Leonard Hutton, Dennis Compton. You can go on with a whole list of them, and they're all roughly the same skill, same ability. I wouldn't like to say which was the best, but I would certainly say who was the best cricketer I ever saw, the best all-rounder, and that was Gary Sobers. I think he was unquestionably the best cricketer I ever set eyes on.
Sobers now continuing his long spell. Alexander takes the catch behind the wicket and Harvey is out for 5.
Play resumes with Benno bowling his first over and Sobers welcomes him with typical aggression.
Sobers 100, a century which was rated by ABC commentator Johnny Moyes as one of the best he has seen in 50 years of cricket.
Did you feel sorry for new players who came along who kept being tagged the new Don Bradman? Whether it was...
Well, I think it gave them a little bit of a handicap. I mean, Norman O'Neill was probably the best case. It happened in New South Wales. He was tagged with that name early on in his career. Norman was a very fine batsman, he really was. But I think it gave him something to live up to, which was a little bit over the fence.
All right, let's three of the big names in the World Series that just finished. Brian Lara, how good's he?
Well, Brian Lara and Tendulkar would probably be the two best batsmen in the world today. And it's very difficult to know which one would be the better player of the two. Tendulkar looks very, very tight. His defence is very, very sound indeed. Lara is probably a little bit more aggressive and takes more risks than Tendulkar. At the end of the day, he'll probably get just as many runs, you know. Some of the Australians have done very well. Stephen Warren and Mark have done extraordinarily well. There is so little difference when you get to that level that it's hard to say he's better than he is.
You told me the story of Tendulkar, how you called Jesse down.
Well, I've only seen Tendulkar on the television. I haven't seen him in person because he hasn't toured Australia. But I did see him play in the one-day games in television, and I was very, very struck by his technique. And I asked my wife to come and have a look at him because I said, I never saw myself play, but I feel that this fellow is playing much the same as I used to play by looking at him. And she had a look at him on the television and she said, yes, there is a similarity between the two.
Well, she saw you play.
Yes, that's right. That's why I asked her to have a look.
What was it about him, Sir Donald? I mean, it's a great tribute.
I can't explain that in detail. It was just his compactness and his stroke production, his technique. It all seemed to gel as far as I was concerned. That was how I felt.
All right, Shane Warne, how good is he, Sir Donald? Well,
firstly, let me say that I think he's the best thing that's happened to the game of cricket for very, very many years, because the epitome of great cricket is the top batsman batting against a third-finger leg spinner. That's the best cricket you can possibly see. We've had 4 great leg spinners in our time. The first one was probably before you were born. That was a fellow named Dr. H.V. Horden. Then there was Arthur Maley. Then there was Clary Grimmett. Then there's Shane Warne. And if you look up their performances, it's remarkable how similar they were. And Maley had the best strike rate of all of them. In other words, he would get his wickets with fewer overs. He got a wicket about every 7 overs he bowled in Test cricket. Horden was, I think, nearly 9, and I think Grimmett was 12. Now, I think Shane Warne is about the same mark at the present time. There is no doubt whatever in my mind that Shane Warne is the best leg spinner of his age that I've ever seen. And whether history will ultimately place him better than these fellows remains to be seen.
Leg spinners get better as they age, don't they?
Well, some do. Grimmett did. It's usually because it takes them so long to gain the accuracy. It's a very difficult thing to bowl a ball and get a lot of spin on it with the third finger. And that's one of the remarkable things about Shane, that he's so accurate at such a young age.
First ball in Test cricket in England for Shane Warne. And he's done it. Gatting has absolutely no idea what has happened to it. He still doesn't know.
When did you first fall in love with Jessie Menzies?
I think that would be the day she came to live with us when I was about 12 years of age. I remember the day very well because I had been set down the street by my mother on a mission to buy some groceries, and I'd run into the doctor's car and I had an accident, had my bike smashed up. He had to drive me home with my nose all cut and scratches all over my face. And when I got home, she was there at the door, having just been delivered by her father, because she was going to stay with us for 12 months to go to school. And we went to school together every day for the rest of that year. And that was when I fell in love with her, the first day. I don't think she ever fell in love with me because I was a terrible sight the day she saw me.
Did you decide then you were going to marry her?
No, not quite that soon, but very shortly afterwards.
No, but she turned you down first up in the 1932.
No, she didn't turn me down. She only postponed it.
Oh, I see. She didn't turn you down. But you wanted to marry before you went on the 1932?
No, I wanted to be engaged.
Okay.
I didn't want to get married.
And she said no?
She said, wait till you come back from England. And if you still feel the same way, then talk to me again.
And you did?
I did straight away, as soon as I got back.
Could you have done all this without Jessie?
No, no one in the world. No one in the world. She's the most marvellous woman who ever existed.
He says that you're the most wonderful person in the world. What do you think of him?
I think he's wonderful.
Do you?
But that's not so good, is it? He's wonderful, not as good as the most wonderful in the world.
That's what he said about you. The most wonderful person in the world.
He's trying to get me tangled up.
No, I didn't.
Now, what about when he ran through the door then, Lady Bradman, as a 12-year-old?
Oh, yes.
Did he look like the bloke that you should one day marry?
Not a bit. Not a bit that day because he was covered in paint and sticking plaster and blood and looked terrible.
And when did you fall in love with him?
Oh, it was a gradual affair from school, wasn't it?
Well, I don't know. You've got to answer the question.
But you played him along for a while. You wouldn't. When he asked you to marry him before the 1932, you said no.
No, I didn't say no. I said we would
told you she postponed it.
Postponed it till he came back so that he would go a free man and enjoy a trip to England.
You weren't playing hard to get?
No, I don't think so.
Can I ask you to tell me the story about the missing engagement ring?
Well, that's a little bit of a mystery. Yes, I bought a nice engagement ring, a single diamond with a couple of diamonds each side. And one day she reported to me that she couldn't find it. And so we racked our brains, we searched everywhere, and she finally came to the conclusion that she'd taken it off, but she was preparing some vegetables for a meal, and it must have been thrown out. And that was the end of it, and we couldn't find it anywhere, and this went on for about 20 years. And one day I was scratching around in the garden up in the backyard, and I suddenly saw something glint in the sunlight. And I turned it over, and it was a ring. I picked this thing up, and I thought it was a ring that a little child would get at the show, in a show bag. But I put it in my pocket, and when I came back to the house, I showed it to my wife, and I said, do you recognise that? Is that one of the kids got this at the show bag or something like that? And she took one look at it, and she said, good gracious me, that's my engagement ring. It had been thrown out with the rubbish, it had gone through the incinerator, it had gone through the vegetable garden, and I accidentally scratched it up on a gravel path. And we had it restored, and she still got it today the same as it always was. Beautiful. Absolute miracle.
Had to be. Was she the boss?
She always has been.
For 64 years. Can I ask you about politics? Did you ever think of going into politics?
No. Politics never appealed to me. Nothing would have ever persuaded me to go into politics.
But you were asked?
I was asked by the Labor Party, I was asked by the Liberal Party if I would be willing to accept nomination for a particular seat. In both cases I said, no, I'm not interested, politics is not for me.
Why?
I just didn't like it. The lifestyle wouldn't appeal to me.
Would you have made a good Prime Minister?
No, I don't think so. No, it wouldn't appeal to me at all.
What about the first President of Australia? Would you like that idea?
Not in the slightest.
Well, now, what about the MCC with the Marylebone Cricket Club? Were you ever approached for a position there?
Yes. The situation with MCC, as you probably know, is that the outgoing president nominates his successor. They don't go to the committee and ask for a ballot or anything like that. He nominates his successor. And 3 different presidents have come to me and asked me if I would allow myself to be nominated as their successor, as president of MCC.
So why didn't you?
I very, very seriously considered it because it's the most prestigious appointment that you can have in the cricket world, and I honestly thought seriously about it, but I inquired and I found that either I would have to fly a good deal between England and Australia to attend meetings and so on, or alternatively I would have to spend 3 months of the year in England. And I felt that I couldn't do either of those things and do the job properly, so I turned it down.
But the idea of an Aussie as the boss of the MCC?
Well, it was a great compliment to be asked.
What about the Johnny Moyes line? An old friend of yours, Johnny Moyes, said that he thought that what you did to Australia in the 1930s was help establish our identity, that's how important you were.
Well, that's what historians say today. I can't say that I was ever really aware of that, but that's for other people to say, not for me.
It's very hard to interview Don on these because you're so self-effacing, but the fact is that you stopped traffic. When you were batting, people would stop and listen to the radio. The fact is that they would not catch a tram or a train home until the radio broadcast finished because they wanted to do that. It's said that when you scored that 100 in the Bodyline series in Melbourne at the MCG, that you could hear the applause and the roar in Collins Street.
But I couldn't. I'm on the Melbourne Cricket Ground playing. See, you know about these things. Historians write about these things, but I was not aware of them at the time.
How about the pop song, Our Don Bradman?
Well, that embarrassed me quite a lot. It still does.
Did it?
Yes.
Did you turn it off if it came on the radio?
I don't like listening to it, yeah.
Our Don Bradman, now I ask you, is he any good? Our Don Bradman, as the batsman he is certainly plump good. Tate and Larwood meet their fate, for it's always shut the gate when the boy from Barrel hits 4 after 4. Our Don Bradman, what a welcome waits for you back home.
I've always admired, as a swimmer, you know, I've always had my head in the water, so to speak, and never really taken a great interest in cricket. It isn't one of my great loves, but you know, Donald Bradman is somebody that I know everything about. He's such a great Australian, so well known, and his legend has just been able to bridge generations, and I've no doubt that it'll continue on.
If cricket was an Olympic sport, Sir Donald Bradman would have brought home a bag full of gold medals. I think Sir Donald Bradman is one of Australia's greatest ever sportsmen, and I think it's very important for our children and grandchildren to remember him, so let's make sure he's never forgotten.
No good, Ray. The fingers won't go anymore. They don't go where I want them to go.
Now, why is that, Don?
Well, I don't know. I suppose it's old age in the main.
Does that frustrate you?
Frustrates me terribly, yes, because I love sitting down at the piano and playing to myself, just for my own enjoyment, that's all. And I can't do it anymore.
Now, what about golf? You don't play golf the way you used to?
No, I can hardly play at all. It's very difficult indeed. At the moment, I can't walk 18 holes. I hope I will get back to it, but I can't do it at the moment.
So when you were playing, or just recently, I mean, what was your score?
Oh, I usually go around between 80 and 90 somewhere. Up to date, I've managed to break my age each year. I couldn't do it at the moment. I'm just hoping I will be able to do it sometime in the future.
Did you ever think that World War II stopped you in your prime?
No, that never entered my mind at all. As a matter of fact, after the war came, I thought my cricket career was finished. I didn't think that I would ever play again. And in fact, as early as 1939 and 1940, I was thinking then that I was probably past my best and I should retire. But it was because the war went on and became this tremendous urge to get cricket started again after the war that I was tempted to come back and play. But previously, I didn't think that would happen. And when I started in 46-7, I thought that would be my last year.
But if we go back to 38, 39, you look at the averages, you were doing some of your best averages ever.
It doesn't matter. I knew I was not batting to please myself as I was in 1930. I wasn't batting so well. I might have been making the runs, but I wasn't pleasing myself so much.
So why did you go on that 1948 tour? Was it for King and Country?
Well, it was very largely, yes. I felt that it was a duty to the nation to get cricket started again. It was the same in Australia as it was in England, although we didn't suffer nearly so much during the war, of course. We didn't have the bombing of our cities in the way that London was bombed. But I felt that I had a duty to play if I could. But I didn't mind playing against England and Australia. That was simple. And I didn't mind playing against the Indians in Australia. That was simple. But when it came to going to England in 48, it was a very difficult proposition because I had three main considerations. The first was my wife and family. I had two young children, a boy 8 years of age and a girl 6 years of age. I would have to leave Jessie behind for about another 8 months. She would have a job of raising a family, and that was very difficult. Secondly was my business, because I had my own stock and share broking business, and I thought that if I have to leave that in charge of somebody else for 8 months, it's quite possible I will lose a lot of clientele, and the business will suffer a great deal. That was the second worry. And of course the third one was whether I was physically well enough to stand the strain, and I very much doubted that. But I thought, well, I can pace myself and I can go along quietly, and I'll manage to get through it. And that is what happened. I only just got through.
Would you regard the 48 side as the best Australian side?
I think it was the best Australian side ever I played with, and I think it's not unreasonable to say that it was the best Australian side that was ever put together.
They referred to Keith Miller as, I mean, he could have almost made it as a batsman, let alone a bowler.
He could make it as a batsman and he could make it as a bowler. He was a magnificent cricketer.
Were there any Ray Lindwell as the opening bowler with any weaknesses in that side?
Well, we were fortunate in a way in that we were playing under an experimental rule which had been brought in by the MCC. And I want to make it clear it was brought in by the MCC, not by us. But we happened to benefit from it, and that was that you could get a new ball after 55 six-ball overs. Now, we had Ray Lindwell, Keith Miller and Bill Johnson. The three of them were magnificent new ball bowlers. And they could take the new ball, and then we could bring on Ernie Toshek, who was very economical and could shut the other end down until we get to the end of the 55 overs and start again with another new ball. I think that actually benefited our team a great deal in 48.
It also seemed to be a happy side, Don.
Very happy side. I think I felt that because I was more or less like a grandfather. You know, I had my 40th birthday on the tour, and the boys seemed to be very pleased to have me in charge, and I had no worries with any of them at all. In previous years, I might have have an argument with a young fellow about how to play the game and so on, but not in 48. They were quite prepared to accept me as the grandfather.
Don, that final innings at the Oval, you didn't know it was going to be the final innings, did it?
No, I did not. I knew it was going to be my last test match, but not that it was going to be my last innings.
Do you laugh now when you think it's the most famous duck in all of Test cricket, Don?
I don't laugh much about it because I'm very sorry I made a duck, and I'd have been glad if I had only made those extra 4 runs that I needed to have an average of 100.
You didn't know that?
But I didn't know it at the time. I don't think the Englishmen knew it either. I think if they'd known it, they might have been generous enough to let me get 4.
But no failure in Test cricket was ever so applauded.
No, that's right, yes. Oh, well, that's history.
Well, tell me about that. Tell me the emotion of that moment when you went out.
Well, it was a very emotional affair because, as I said, I knew it was my last test match, and it may be the last time I'll bat in a test match in England. And Norman Yardley, who was a very good friend of mine, was captain of the English side. He called all the fellows around me, and they all sang for He's a Jolly Good Fellow and gave me 3 cheers. And obviously you've got to be very emotional, otherwise you're not human. But But some people said I got out because I had tears in my eyes, and of course that's rubbish. I was certainly emotionally concerned, but I wasn't that bad.
Enter Don Bradman, who got a great ovation. Then a special cheer on the field. Holly's bowling and Don playing perhaps his last test innings here. The second bowler, Googly, got him. Well, it isn't often you get a big hand when you make a duck, but this was different.
If Holly would have been writing the script, you made a century in your first-class game here at the Adelaide Oval. You should have then made 100 in your last game.
Well, I made up for it because I made 100 on my birthday at Lord's a little bit afterwards against the gentlemen of England.
What about the fact, I mean, Hollies was good enough to play Test cricket, but he really wasn't the best bowler you ever faced, and he's the bloke who got you.
Oh, yes, but it's only one ball at a time in cricket, and he was a very good bowler, very good indeed.
How did you feel when you walked a standing ovation from the English side, of course, but also from all those thousands and thousands of English people there? They didn't really want you to get out, did they?
No, I was very sad walking out, very sad indeed, because I felt I'd let them down. But that's life, you have to accept it.
What did you think afterwards when you got back in the dressing room? What did you say? What did you think?
I think I used the expression fancy doing that, and that's all there was to it.
Second ball.
Many people thought that for so great a figure to retire at 40 was to cheat the game of even greater glory, but Bradman was firm. Here were his own words on the subject.
And I think I'm probably the best judge of the many little creaks and groans that go on in my joints throughout the day, especially when we're out in the field. And I'm quite sure I shall have no regrets at all in having to sit in the pavilion and watch the other fellows.
What about the story of the cricket bat, the first cricket bat you got? You were given a full-size one that your dad cut down?
Yes, one of the players in the team gave me his bat. He had broken it during his innings and he had no further use for it, so he gave it to me and said, you can have that. And my father was a carpenter, so he sawed a couple of inches off the bottom and he glued up the joint in the bat and shortened it, and I used it for a while in playing matches. It was a very good bat indeed. I loved it.
Did you get a century with that?
No, I never got a century with it. No.
Your mum promised you a new bat if you got a century.
Mum promised me a bat if I got 100 in the final, and I got 300, and I told her I wanted a 3 bat, but she wouldn't play.
When critics said that you were not as classical as someone like Victor Trumper or Stan McCabe, would you agree?
I suppose cricket's the only game in the world where you get marks for your style.
As against the scoreboard?
I mean, if you play golf, it's the lowest score wins. If you play tennis, it's the man who wins the match. They don't worry about his style. There were lots of players, I suppose, who were more attractive to watch than I was. But in the end, I suppose it's the fellow who makes the most runs who wins the game.
You made it look so easy. Was it easy?
I don't know that I did.
You did. Take my word for it. You did. Was it easy, though, for you? Was it simply a matter of just doing what came naturally?
Very often it was, yes. Not always. Sometimes it was very difficult.
When was it difficult?
Oh, well, when the wicket was worn, for argument's sake, and you had very good spin bowlers playing against you. I had a couple of very good tussles with Clary Grimmett. I had a very good tussle or two with Bill O'Reilly. And Alec Benson gave me a lot of trouble in later years.
And you regarded O'Reilly as the best bowler you'd ever...
O'Reilly is the best bowler that I have ever played against or have ever seen.
Don, what did it mean for you to wear the green and gold?
Oh, well, I was terribly proud of it, of course. Anybody's got to be very proud of that when you represent your country. It doesn't matter whether it's cricket or football or whatever it may be. You must be proud of it because it's vastly more important to represent your country than it is to represent yourself.
Was it the highlight of your life, and was that...
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt, yeah. The pinnacle of my ambition was to play for Australia, and that was it, to wear the green blazer.
Breaking records, did that matter?
No, it didn't matter at all. That was entirely incidental. They came by accident.
Now, did that then mean, with all that attention and the songs and so on, were you suffering from the tall poppy syndrome? Did you suddenly find there was envy and jealousy from colleagues?
No, I was never conscious of much opposition or jealousy with my teammates. In the main, they were very helpful, very cooperative. Well, one or two occasions, certainly, one or two people, certainly. But in the main, I was very happy with my relationship with all my colleagues.
How about when you became captain of Australia in 36-37 series, and in fact, some of the players were reprimanded?
Well, there was a certain amount of jealousy at that time because some of them wanted another player as captain instead of me. But that was only a very brief duration. I think it was highlighted a little bit by the fact that we lost the first two matches after I was captain.
It was against England again, the old enemy.
Yes, and we really lost those two matches because we got caught on a wet wicket on each occasion. In the same way, in the balance of the series, we caught the Englishmen on wet wickets on two occasions in one of the matches. But the fact that I lost the first two matches as captain gave certain impetus to the fact that I was not going to be a good captain. But that didn't make any difference because the Border Control appointed the captain. They made me captain for the whole series.
The Border Control also reprimanded, greats like Bill O'Reilly and Stan McCabe and Fleetwood Smith and so on. You bore the criticism of that, didn't you? Some of them afterwards said that you'd gone and basically dobbed them in.
I know they did. That was a great pity. And I mercilessly attacked some of the board members for what they did. I told them how foolish they were to call these fellows up before them without letting me know what was going to happen. And they said, well, we genuinely didn't want you to be concerned or to know anything about this, but you don't mean to tell me that the players were going to think that. They would obviously think that I had complained. And I didn't. I didn't know anything about it. It was a very unfortunate happening.
They were reprimanded for allegedly not trying hard enough.
Allegedly not supporting me.
What about the rumours, the stories that I've read again, that it was these Irish Catholics against the Masons?
Well, it so happened that the fellows who were called up before the board were all Catholics. And one or two of them were not really very friendly towards me. But the religious thing didn't surface between us. There was never any argument between us on religion.
So you weren't aware of it? I mean, you were a Mason, though?
No, I was not aware of it at all.
And these were, people like O'Reilly and McCabe and so on.
Well, I knew O'Reilly was an Irish Catholic. I knew Fingleton was a Catholic. That didn't bother me. It didn't worry me one iota.
Yeah. What about the fact that you write about in your book as well, that the suggestion that you weren't one of the boys, that in fact because you didn't go and drink with them all the time because you were captain, it made it difficult?
I think that was just simply a point of view. At the end of the day, some of the boys would like to go into the bar and have a couple of beers with their mates and so on. I didn't. I didn't drink. I didn't want to go into the bar. That was their privilege to do what they liked, and I did what I liked, and there was no argument about that.
There was some controversy about you walking around Balmoral with the King with your hands in your pocket.
Yes, there was.
What's the background of that?
Well, I was very cross about that. It was a totally happy and carefree occasion. Totally informal, and the King and I and about 10 or 12 other people went for a walk across the lawn alongside Balmoral Castle. And the photographers were there, of course, the press were there in force, and they took a photo of the group walking across the lawn. As I repeat, there must have been about a dozen people in the photo. But when they published it in the paper, they only published the King and I walking side by side. All the others were cut off. Now, in the ones that were cut off, there were about 3 chaps with their hands in their pockets.
Like you?
Same as I was. Yeah. But, of course, when they published it, I was the only one. And I was accused then of being rude to the King, putting my hands in my pockets. And I replied and said, well, I wasn't rude to him because I wasn't the only one, and in any case, he had a kilt on. He couldn't put his hand in his pocket.
Early this year, Alan Border retired after 20 years of playing. He's obviously one of the great players of this era and this generation. He had more innings than you had. He finished up with about 1,000 runs less than you got in first-class cricket. His average, and he's one of the great players, was 51.
Mm-hmm.
Your average in first-class cricket was 95.
Yeah.
Why the difference?
I think the only answer I can give to that is you better ask Alan Border. I can't tell you why. I don't know why he used to get out. So often I would think, well, he set today to make a big score, and yet he would make a mistake and get out. Now, I can't tell you why he got out, whether it was lack of concentration or what it was.
But again, I mean, I'm not hammering the point. I don't even begin to understand, because it would seem if ever they were going to get good scores, it would be today, where they don't have to go to work in the morning and after they've played a test as you did. It would seem that they, as I say, that they can have good diets and they can go and exercise and go to the gym and physio, all those things that you didn't have. But you put Greg Chappell and Ian Chappell's average together and they don't even make yours as a one man.
Well, don't ask me the question. I don't know the answer. I really don't.
Okay. You've thought about it?
Not seriously, because earlier in this interview I told you that I had already seen many players whom I thought had more ability than I had. And why they didn't make more runs than I did, I do not know.
With me now is legendary batsmen and people who played alongside the great man, Sir Donald Bradman. I'm joined by Bill Brown and Arthur Morris. Welcome to this terrific program in honour of the Don, and also the Australian captain, Mark Taylor, and Shane Warne. Mark, you've seen the interview that Ray had with the Don, and your impressions of the man after seeing that?
Oh, my impressions haven't really changed much. I think he's probably, if not the greatest Australian, in a group of 2 or 3 elite people who've played cricket or have represented their country in some way, who would probably be the most recognisable person in Australia.
He gave you a couple of handy hints tonight about the lighter bats and batting technique. Are you going to adopt them with the Australian team?
That was very interesting for me to listen to that, because that's something that I don't think anyone's taught. I think he summed up very well that most players these days are taught to play with a nice, straight, perpendicular bat. And at times, I think he's probably right. The bat does tend to open, and that makes you more vulnerable to being caught behind. But I'm not sure I've got the time to try and work the ball that way. As said, I think he said 1/7 of a second. Yeah. And that much time, most of us are pretty happy to hit it.
Yeah. You can't think in a couple of seconds, mate, like 1/7 of a second.
It's a technique that worked for the great man, and you don't put yourself in that class. Is that what you're saying?
Definitely not. Definitely
Shane,
not.
Richie Benaud often said one of his great disappointments in life is that he wasn't able to bowl to the Don. I'm wondering how you would feel about bowling to a man of that stature with that batting average.
Yeah.
How would you approach it?
Yeah, I don't know. That's something. I suppose there's a few people I would have liked to have bowled to. I think Viv Richards and Ian Botham at their peak, you would have liked to bowl to. Bradman's in a different class to anybody else that you think about you'd like to bowl to, or for bowlers who they'd like to bat against. But I think Bradman, there's an aura about him, and because of what he did and everything, it'd be great to actually bowl and see what happens. I mean, he'd probably smash you all around the park, but it wouldn't matter. You just to bowl the ball and see how he played you.
He certainly gave you bucketfuls tonight. You must go out now and think, well, I'm going to be worth a couple extra million now.
Oh, I don't know about the million side of things, but I mean, for him, someone like Sir Donald Bradman to say, you've changed the world of cricket and you've helped in some way, then, I mean, he knows better than anyone. And for him to say that's a great honour for me, for him to say something is fantastic.
You heard Sir Donald talk about the great batsmen, great bowlers, but he spoke about Shane, and he also spoke about Lara, and particularly about Tendulkar. Would you agree with his assessment, Mark?
I would, actually. I think with Tendulkar, he's more the technician and probably the closest player at the moment to the perfect player. Beautiful straight bat, takes his time if he has to, can be explosive if he needs to be. A very good all-round player.
Shane?
I think Sir Donald's on the right track. I think you're throwing the war boys there as well, Stephen and Mark. I think Mark had just as good as Sachin Tendulkar did in the World Cup. I think you throw Stephen in for what he's done over the last few years, and I think you got there as probably the top 4 batters.
Bill, you've played alongside him. You know him very well, of course, and you too, Arthur. First time you batted with him, how did you feel?
Oh, he was a very good running partner, I thought. He had the ability to lift you while you were batting with him. as much as he could with me anyway. And it wasn't long before I was sitting and running and having a whale of a time. At the end of one over, he called me down the wicket, and the thought crossed my mind he might say, Bill, you know, you're doing fairly well. Keep this up and you could go places. And he said, Bill, I've never had the pleasure of batting with you before. I thought, that figures, he's never even seen me before, you know. So he said, do you think you could call when you're going to run? That was one of the cardinal sins, you know, not to call. And so anyway, next time I got a single, I think they heard me up in the Blue Mountains. The crowd would double or triple once the word got round that Bradman was going to bat in the afternoon. And they'd give you half an hour, 20 minutes after lunch. They'd put up with you. And then you were batting in Bradman time, you see. And if you got hit on the pads, not only would the bowler appeal and the fieldsman, but the whole 30,000, 40,000 would appeal, you see. And when you eventually got out, you'd get tremendous ovation, not because you played well, but because you were getting out of the way to let the little fella come in, you see.
Does that mean you felt unwanted, Arthur?
Oh, this is pre-war when he was really, really at his top. He was a great batsman after the war, but I'm just sad that some people, a lot of people, I wish everyone could have seen him pre-war. He was so brilliant. Yeah.
That most famous duck, you were there.
Yeah, well, I
Your
was at the
feelings?
other end, yeah. And Holly's, the wicket was doing it, but he was a finger spinner. And you can spin him in England, but you can't do it out here in Australia. But he bowled him a couple of good leggies, and then he bowled him a wrong un. And he might just, I think he just got a little touch, went in and took the off stump. But it was a very dramatic moment, and there was dead silence everywhere. It was extraordinary, the whole crowd. And then he turned, put his bat under his arm as he used to do, and then off he went.
It was very matter-of-fact, wasn't he, when he got out? It was just the bat straight under the arm, straight
sure,
off.
there's no... he was obviously disappointed. I've often said to people, I was there, and they say, were you? I said, yeah, I was up the other end. They said, were you playing? I said, yeah, I got 196. But everybody remembers Don's 0, you know?
Yes. The Bradman Museum, that is obviously very much in the Don's mind in being with us tonight.
I think it's wonderful, yes. It'll become the real Mecca, really, for everyone.
Welcome back. Our volunteers from the Rover Scouts are manning the phones. If you want to help complete the Bradman Museum, ring us on 1800 24 119. We want to thank the National Australia Bank, where a special account has been set up for donations at branches throughout Australia. Donations over $2 are tax deductible. Now, if there's one bloke who can claim to have had a bird's eye view of cricket's greatest players, it's England's flamboyant umpire Dickie Bird. He's seen them all, but Dickie, no one comes close to the Don.
Yeah, that's right. My father used to tell me, he said he was the greatest player that he had ever seen, and he walked 38 miles in 1934 to watch the test match at Headingley, England v the Australians. My father walked 38 miles from Barnsley to Headingley, and then he queued, when he got there, they were queuing miles and miles, and then he walked 38 miles back home at night, close of play. He did that every day. He wasn't let down. The great man scored well over 300. And, of course, that wasn't... It gave my father a lot of pleasure. But I don't think the English bowlers were very happy and the English fielders, because they had a lot of leather chasing.
Tell me, the first time that you saw Sir Donald Bradman, do you remember the moment?
Yes, I'll never forget. My father took me as a schoolboy to watch that great Australian side in 1948. They played Yorkshire at Bramall Lane, Sheffield. I thought that was probably one of the greatest test sides that I've ever seen. It was a great side, and the great man didn't let me down. He scored 50-odd that day, and I enjoyed every moment of it, and I've never forgot that day. I mean, when he played at Trent Bridge, wherever he played in England, the crowds flocked from all over Great Britain to watch the great man play. They came from miles and miles, and they walked and walked. in those days.
Dickie, the way you express yourself and you call him the great man, it's almost like a religious experience.
Well, he is, isn't he? Because, let's be fair, he is something very, very special.
He's a national treasure.
Sir Donald Bradman was a treasure. He was class, and there is no replacement for class.
When Dickie Bird's got that finger up, you're in trouble. Dickie Bird will be sadly missed from the international cricket scene when he retires next month. OK, the phone lines are open if you'd like to make a donation to the Bradman Museum Trust Building Fund. Ring us, we take credit cards, or you can make a donation to any branch of the National Australia Bank. The phone number is 1800 24 1119. India's batting sensation, Sachin Tendulkar, has certainly caught Sir Donald's eye. He sees a style very much like his own in the young batsman. Former England captain and Channel 9 cricket commentator Tony Greig spoke to Sachin Tendulkar while he was on tour in the Arab Emirates and asked him his reaction to what Sir Donald had said about him.
I've always thought that comparisons don't matter to me a lot, but this particular comparison, I feel great to be compared with Sir Don Bradman, but looking from his angle, I feel it's very unfair on part of Sir Don to be compared to me, because he has played cricket for 20 years and I've just played for 7 years. Even if I can be half as consistent as what he was, I'd be a very happy man.
When you hear the name Sir Donald Bradman, what do you think about?
When I think of this name, it's very hard to express what I feel inside, because I think to average 99 in Test cricket, it's amazing. I just don't have words to express what I feel about him. He's genius. I mean to say, the god of cricket.
What about the difference between the financial environment in cricket?
Nowadays, there's a lot of money involved in cricket because of media coverage. But if you ask me, towards the end of my career, I would prefer to average 99.96 rather than signing those contracts.
And we'll have to wait to the year 2000 to see Sachin Tendulkar in Australia. Mark Taylor and his team will be relishing that battle. Mark is with me now to announce some big donations to the Bradman Museum appeal. But before that, Mark, I hope you are the captain in the year 2000.
Oh, so do I. It means if I'm the captain in the year 2000, myself and Australian cricket must be doing very well, so I certainly look forward to that.
Isn't it amazing when you see a man like Sir Donald Bradman, you just stop and listen because he's got so much to say, and you've pointed out many, many occasions that you haven't heard him talk that often.
No, I haven't. In my career, which has been a reasonable time, I suppose, I've only spoken to him twice, and once was in a team situation, so the other time was at, I think, Kooyonga Golf Club, so he doesn't speak out very often, so when a great Australian likes that speaks out, I think everyone listens.
How did you feel the first time that he came into your presence?
Oh, very nervous. He's held in awe by all cricketers and probably a lot of Australians. As I said, when Donald Bradman speaks, everyone listens and takes notice.
OK, well, you've got some very, very good news.
Yes, Ken, I have. As you know, I work for the Toyota Car Company, and they tonight have pledged a major donation towards the Bradman Museum.
Terrific news. Several top Australian companies have generously donated $50,000 each to the appeal. They are now members of the Bradman 50,000 Club, and they are Qantas, Australia's domestic and international airline, Sanitarium Weet-Bix, Westfield Shopping Towns, Carlton and United Breweries, sponsors of the Australian One-Day Series for the next 5 years, Rothschild Australia, one of Australia's leading independent merchant banks, and South Australia, who are sponsors of the International Test Series commencing this summer. We've had a tremendous response from you, the public, calling the phone room with hundreds of donations ranging from 50 cents to $500 to $1,000. A 6-year-old pledged his 50 cents pocket money, and an 80-year-old Sydney woman who saw Sir Donald play donated $10. And Diners Club have lent their support with a major donation. The phone room will be open until late, so call on 1800 24 1119 or go to your nearest National Australia Bank tomorrow and make a donation. Please keep calling, and if you can't get through at the moment, be patient. Your support is greatly appreciated. Now let's join Ray and Sir Donald Bradman for some very special closing words.
What would you like to be remembered for?
in one word, if I had to put it in one word, integrity.
Well, I think I'll probably give you that.
Thank you for that.
Is there anything you'd like to say?
You asked me this earlier on, and I said I had something I would like to say, but I wouldn't trust my memory, so I wrote it down on a piece of paper. If you don't mind, I'll read this to you.
Please.
And this was a statement made by Lord Harris. Now, he was regarded by some people as the greatest ambassador who ever lived in the game of cricket, because he, in the olden days, of course, because he died in 1931, he was captain of Kent, he was captain of England, he was governor of Bombay, and he did a lot to encourage cricket in India. And on his 80th birthday, he made a statement about cricket, and this is what he said on that occasion. "You do well to love cricket, for it is more free from anything sordid, anything dishonourable than any game in the world. To play it keenly, generously, self-sacrificingly is a moral lesson in itself, and the classroom is God's air and sunshine. Foster it, my brothers, so that it may attract all who may find the time to play it. Protect it from anything that would sully it, so that it may grow in favour with all men." And that was my creed, and I commend that to everybody.
Sir Donald, thank you for that. It wasn't hard, was it?
Yes, it was very hard.
No, it wasn't hard. Can we do it again in 10 years' time?
If I'm still alive, yes.
All right, thank you so much.